In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna bid on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now with today's guest, your host, Chris Bair.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Bair, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. We appreciate you joining us on our radio show today. If you're just joining us and you're not really familiar with the Legacy of Agriculture and you miss our radio show, you can join us on Apple, Spotify, and now YouTube. And so we appreciate our listeners very much, and we appreciate our sponsor, Pifer Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Today, my guest is Neil Broughton. We are excited to announce that we have a brand new land manager working out of the Sioux Falls facility. Our good friend Tim Peters is retired. Those of you that know Tim and have gotten to know Tim over the last 4 years, he did a phenomenal job and decided to retire. And Neil has joined us here. Thanks, Neil, for joining me this morning.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You're a good old South Dakota boy.
Yeah, grew up just east of Worthing on a farm, raising sheep and some row crop. And
Really?
Yeah. It's been in the family history for quite a few years. Both my grandpas were farmers in the area, and Harrisburg area and the Worthing area also.
So tell us about growing up around sheep, and I'll tell you why I'm asking you that question.
Well, growing up around sheep, I get used to getting harassed and picked on all the time, because there's tons and tons of jokes about sheep farmers, but it comes with a lot of headaches, just a lot of watching over livestock, because just like everybody knows that sheep, you look at them one day, they're fine, next day they're dead, kind of a thing. So it's a lesson learned. Keep your eyes on the livestock and keep them fed and well in good health.
I say that in a complimentary way, because one of my fondest memories growing up on a farm was as our neighbors had 2 bands of sheep, which was a lot. A band is 1,000, 1,000 head. And in my early teens, there were several early springs where I had the opportunity to go down and help do the lambing and take care of the bum lambs.
Yes.
And it was one of my fondest memories of taking care of sheep being raised next to a neighbor that had sheep. We never had sheep, but it really is an experience that everybody should have.
Oh, any kind of livestock. It's a big benefit, a pleasure. I mean, you learn so much, and you respect all the work that comes along with it, from growing the livestock to putting it on the table. It's a great way to learn.
So what are some of your favorite and most fond memories of being on the farm when it comes to livestock?
Well, from livestock, seeing the birth of a new lamb, growing a flock from little to nothing to I guess our sheep flock was mostly based after growing the purest Suffolk breed of sheep we could possibly find, getting the biggest meat production, the biggest sheep that we can possibly grow on the farm. That was our main goal. So just seeing a herd grow and then just kind of get to a better genetic outcome, a better bloodline. Yeah.
You are exactly right. And it doesn't matter whether it's cattle, sheep, horses, even down to the small animals, pigs. To have that experience of growing up on that farm is irreplaceable, because you learn so many responsibilities, and sometimes, unfortunately, on the farm, you learn things the hard way, and you see life, you see death, you experience all of those, but as a whole, you experience the beauty of what God has given us on the farm.
Definitely. It's a pleasure to wake up every single morning with seeing the sunrise and just hearing everything just come alive every morning. It's pretty cool.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about how you got into land management. I know that you have been in the land management all of your career. Tell us a little bit about your career in the past.
I guess it's starting off even with as a young kid, grabbing a lawnmower. I see it as a little bit of land management, even in a small aspect of maintaining a yard. It's talking to the customer, seeing what they want done to the yard, bagging, mowing the lines, directional lines, and all that kind of stuff, and keeping it as a high quality product when you're done with it. So I did that growing up, and then I also worked on a Christmas tree farm locally.
Really?
So, yeah. So I was Billy the Beaver in costume every once in a while, or I got in a reindeer costume and stuff like that, and helped the customers load Christmas trees. But going from the spring and planting a new seedling that's only a couple inches tall to seeing an end product getting cut in the field and hauled off for a beautiful Christmas tree for a customer.
How long does it take to grow a Christmas tree?
About 7 to 8 years, roughly. It all depends on what kind of variety you want to plant and produce.
So tell me a little bit about that. That's an interesting part of agriculture that we don't get to talk about very often, is this Christmas trees.
Right.
And I don't want to ask the obvious questions, but I got to ask the obvious questions. Yep. What is it like?
It's just like raising a row crop in a sense, because you're taking care of an end product that I guess you may not get back, have a cut finished product until 8 years down the road or 7 years down the road. But you're still fertilizing, watering, maintaining the ground around it, and preparing for the future. And you're starting 8 years behind, starting with a small seedling until you get to that end product.
So we're used to, in agriculture, planting seeds in the spring, harvesting them in the fall, which is, 120, 180 day process. Sometimes with some crops, it's only 90 days. Some crops you harvest, like hay, you harvest 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah.
But with Christmas trees, what you plant it, you don't get to see the benefit from it for 7 to 8 years. That's
correct.
That's learning patience, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all those summers and all those winters you worry about the weather. That's 7 to 8 years of worrying about is a tornado or a flood or a severe drought going to come through and take out my Christmas trees or my orchard of some sort. It's a lot to think about.
You said worrying about them in the wintertime. What is there to worry about trees in the wintertime?
Winter burn. That's like a lot of the Christmas trees around in South Dakota are actually painted trees that you buy actually from native.
Okay.
They're Scotch pines. They're mostly what we grew. And we actually painted them green during the late summer so that then they'd be dried out for harvest time for Christmas trees. Yeah.
What do you mean paint? I did not know this, Neil.
Yeah, you'd actually just drive around with a big, huge wand sprayer and paint trees.
Really?
Yeah, paint them all green. Because otherwise, the Christmas trees, they're going a dormant phase, and they're Scotch pines, which actually turn a lighter brown. And nobody wants a brown Christmas tree in their living room, kind of a thing. So
that'd be a Charlie Brown Christmas tree, right?
It is. Nobody wants that.
That's, you know what? Here again, doing the legacy of agriculture, I've learned something new. I did not know that. That's why they look the way they look.
Exactly. They're all nice and the same exact color out in the field.
Okay. Yeah. Everything's consistent.
Exactly.
So, well, we appreciate you joining us here, Neil. For a complete listing, I want to talk a little bit about Pifers in the spring of 2025. We got an excellent line of land and equipment auctions coming in the spring of 2025. For a complete list of all of those auctions in 2025, you'll want to go to pifers.com. That's pifers.com, or simply call our office at 605-836-2277. Nobody does it better.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pifer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pifer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifers. Nobody does it better.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Bair, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us in our second segment of the Legacy of Agriculture. My friend and now co-worker, team member, Neil Broughton is joining us for the first time on the Legacy of Agriculture. He just joined us at the beginning of 2025, and we appreciate Neil for coming along. Neil, right here on the table, I realize that our radio listeners can't see it, but you can join us on YouTube, of course. You've got an antler sitting on our table here during our recording. Tell me a little bit about that and your experience with working for the game, fish, and parks.
Yeah. Well, this is actually a white-tailed deer antler shed, and I call it. It's one of my main addictions. Everybody has their little addiction with certain things, but finding deer antlers is one of my addictions. I go out and look for them every single spring.
Really?
So I go out during the fall, late fall, early winter, and kind of see where they're herding up at, and then get land permission from that landowner. And then I go out there and just walk around the property and learn about where the deer are wintering at, how they're moving through the properties, and then part of the benefit is actually picking up some deer sheds.
So tell us some of your favorite experiences in working for the game, fish, and parks, and how you enjoyed that. I know you've talked a lot about that in the past, and I've heard snippets of you working for the game, fish, and parks. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I worked for Game, Fish, and Parks for 19 years. I started working for them out of Newton Hill State Park as a technician. And the work with Game, Fish, and Parks, it goes from changes day to day. I mean, for working for Newton Hills, one day I was doing a prescribed burn on some native prairie, planting some forbs or flowers into a new grass seeding, planting trees. Or I was cleaning the bathroom or restroom the next day, or picking up some trash or something.
Your favorite part of the job,
exactly.
Right?
Everybody loves cleaning bathrooms. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, there's just with Game, Fish, and Parks, there's so much diversity. Your day changes from your workload changes from hour to hour to day. It changes quite a bit.
For our listeners that are not familiar with Newton Hills is just south of Sioux Falls, right along the Sioux River.
Yes.
And it kind of starts the hills that go all the way down into Omaha and down into that part of the country.
Down
and
to Lois Hills and all that kind of area.
Yeah, the Lois Hills, and that's beautiful country down in there.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of kayaking down the Sioux River, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's credible to a river to be on, for sure.
It is.
So, what are some of your favorite stories about?
When I worked for the Park Division, I worked for Newton Hills Park Division for I think it was 6 years, and then I went to the Wildlife Division, worked for them for 12. The Wildlife Division. I covered the southeastern 20 counties in South Dakota, pretty much from Huron to Springfield, all over to Brookings, down to Sioux City. That was kind of my territory. But in that range, we got to work with, my main role was land management, which was the fencing, the spraying, helping seasonals go out and take care of those properties that the state owned. But so I worked a lot with the neighboring landowners, fence boundary issues, noxious weed control, stuff like that. And I also set up some ag leases for having them do food plots on our property, just saving us a lot more money, having the local producer go out there and put food plots on our own property.
You had talked a little bit a few minutes ago about shed hunting, and that's interesting to me because I grew up in the Rocky Mountains.
Yes.
And I never did any shed hunting, although I hunted big game for a lot of years until I moved into the Midwest. But one of my sons is an avid shed collector, and he goes out in the springtime. Yeah. My son James does, and he goes out and collects sheds from elk.
Yes.
And one year, I have to tell you a funny story. One year, and he was just out of high school. He was getting on his own. He'd gone and rented a house, and he had a good job, and he was living hand to mouth. And I called him one day, and and it was right after Thanksgiving a few years back, and I says, "What are you doing for Christmas?" And we visited for a while, and I says, "You got a Christmas tree?" He says, "Oh yeah." He says, "I got a Christmas tree." So he sent me a text of his Christmas tree, and he had taken all of these sheds and he had built a Christmas tree.
Yep.
And that was his Christmas tree. And I'm telling you, Neil, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I laughed until I thought I was going to die. So I actually went out to see my kids for Christmas that year. And I went down to Walmart or Target or somewhere, and I bought some lights, and I decorated it for him. So he had his antler tree with all the decorations under it. And I've got a feeling that will probably always be a tradition for James's to have an antler tree.
But my antler Christmas tree never goes down. It's up year round. It's a great place to store the ones from the year that you found, kind of thing. But with the shed antlers, it's hard for me to depart with them. So I got piles and piles and piles, and I'm very lucky to have a great wife that lets me have them in the house and store them and all that kind of stuff.
A better half?
Yeah, a better half that she puts up with a lot of heartache for her, a lot of problems from me.
Sometimes we call that a lot of nonsense, right?
Exactly, yeah. I got tons of nonsense in the basement and everything. Yeah, she helps. It's quite,
Antler collecting from elk is big business.
It is, yeah.
And why is that?
A lot of furniture making. There was a market quite a few years ago when China was actually buying the ground up powder and using it over there for different reasons. But now that with all the CWD, the diseases that come along with the deer, they're no longer taking that stuff across seas.
Oh, that surprises me, I guess, after that, because I knew it was big business. I knew that there were people from the east that would actually go out into the Rocky Mountains where there was major elk concentrations, herds, I should say, and collecting them and grinding them for that purpose.
There's still a lot of people that do it out there. They have grand openings. They have a fence closing. They have an opening at a certain time out west, and people just mad rush out into the prairie, out into the mountains, and pick up antlers.
Have you ever taken time in the winter to go to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and see all the elk that come into Jackson Hole?
I have not. My father has done that, and that's one of my next steps is to go see that during the winter and watch them. Even try to ride along on the sleigh and help push out alfalfa. That's what I'd really like to do.
Yeah, they having grown up in that part of the country, or not far from Jackson Hole, I shouldn't say that part of the country, but growing up, and there were several occasions that we were able to go up and see those massive herds of elk outside of Jackson Hole and to feed them. They're a magnificent, majestic. They're a majestic animal to see the big bulls and all the cows that come in, and it's an amazing experience. So tell me a little bit about what it was like to manage land when you had parks that were next to landowners and.
Yeah, well, I helped the last 3 years of working for game fishing parks. I actually helped create Good Earth State Park, which is right south of Sioux Falls, and that was I dealt with landowners and tribal members on developing that park, and I guess it was everybody comes at it with their own ideas and thought process on how to develop the park, and I had to help grab those ideas and mesh them together, also with my supervisors in the state game fishing parks, meshing it all together and make it all work together to make what it is today, kind of thing.
Rewarding or tough?
All the above.
Both?
Yes. Yeah. I met some of the most amazing people and gained so much knowledge through the neighbors and the tribal members that I've met. It's just a great experience. I'm so glad I did that.
It appears to me that probably many years ago, neighboring landowners were to parks were tough to get a hold of, but the mentality has kind of changed a lot over the years to being land managers at participating with state and federal and local agents to preserve wildlife and to preserve our lands for the future benefit of the public.
Right. There's a lot of state and federal programs out there to help the landowner develop their property.
Folks, we're going to be right back with the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pifer's Auction, Realty and Land Management. Pifer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifer's. Nobody does it better.
Folks, we're back. I'm your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us. Neil Broughton, our newest land manager, is joining us here at our facility south of Sioux Falls, and we have had a really good conversation about where you came from and you're growing up and working for the game and fish or fishing. You know, I grew up in Idaho where it was the fish and games.
Yes.
I come out here and it's fish and game fish and parks. And so I'm having a heck of a time making that transition back to saying it in the right order.
Yeah, and then you go to other states and it's DNR. They're all combined.
Yep.
You know, so South Dakota Game Fish and Parks is its own entity. There's different funding for each, the wildlife division and the park division. So South Dakota, we're really blessed with a very diverse funding source for our staff and for making what the GF&P really has right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's amazing. Those guys work. I think for me, being a member of just the public, what you would say the public, I don't ever really see how important your job is in preserving and managing all of the parks that we have to in the state of South Dakota, or just here in 3 or 4 local counties. It's a lot of work.
It is. You know, it's I do believe at the time when I was working for the wildlife division, the southern 20 counties, we're up to 43,000 acres. We're managing between 3 full-time people and then a couple office staff. So it's a lot of acres to manage, but that's with a partnership of the private side, the private entities, they helped us get some amazing projects done.
That's absolutely incredible. And I know that I've become more of a park goer all the time. I've kind of become a city slicker in a way. Is that it's been a lot of years since I've been on the farm, and so as living in town now, quote unquote, the parks become more important because that's your connectivity to nature, and to be able to go to the parks and not have it overrun with weeds, and having good trails and good bridges and clean facilities is really, really nice. I can tell you guys have done a good job.
The park staff and they dedicate their lives to that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You said something that was very interesting. I believe in our first segment, you were talking about being a land manager as a young man that can be as simple as mowing your lawn and keeping your yard up.
Yes. Yeah.
And now, as you've gotten older, now you've joined us on the land management side. Why land management? What is the value of land management in agriculture?
Yeah, well, the reason I went into land management is that everybody it seems like everybody has a desire to own their own property, and when I was growing up, I was very poor, came from a very poor family, and I just assumed that I was never going to have my own property, but I knew that I had to drive that I can maintain it or help other people manage their own property. So that's the direction I went with it. So I learned as much as I possibly can, and then put all my knowledge and gave it to the public that actually is blessed to own their own property. Yeah.
Well, we're finding now that there's more and more, as the agricultural production population is decreasing from 100 years ago, where 85-90% of the population in the United States was directly related to agriculture. Now that it's down to less than 2%, we're finding that mom and dad once they have farmed for 40 or 50 or 60 years, the children are well educated. They go on, they have their own families, and mom and dad now are grandparents or sometimes even great grandparents, that they're wanting to move into town where you have all of the niceties, and the need for land management is increasing substantially because they maybe because of health issues or maybe just because of logistics, they can't take care of the farm anymore. And so land management and hiring land management is becoming more crucial. So tell me, as if I was sitting across the table from you and I had 500 acres or 1,000 acres or 2,500 acres that I wanted managed, what would you tell me as you were sitting across the table from me?
Well, first, I'll tell you, thank you for coming to Pifer's. Thank you for putting the trust into us and the company. And then I would break it down to what you desire off the property. What is your end game? The last 5 years, I had my own land management company, and it's amazing all the different directions that you can go, or people that want to go with the property. From, I want to make the most money I possibly can off the property, to, you know what, I'm done with row crop. I'm going to put it all back into CRP or just turn it all into grass, and I want some high forbs. It's just a great diverse of what the landowner wants off the property. And that's what I'm here to do, is try to get what the customer desires off their property, off their ag.
What the client wants.
Exactly.
What are your long-term goals?
Yeah.
You know, in listening to a little bit of you guys talk on the land management side, I am on the auction side of it, and we kind of keep the land management and the auction separate, so there's not a conflict of interest there. But people are kind of interesting. They can have 1,000 acres of highly productive farm ground, but really mom is more worried about whoever rents it keeps the tree row clean.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, you got to look at it with a fine tooth comb for everything. I mean, maybe the land's owned by 4 different people or 5 different people, and one person has a desire for the hunting rights, or they want to improve it for habitat, and then the other ones just want the most money out the property. So you got to go through the whole entire property and design it around what they want. Maybe you want to keep the sloughs, keep woodlots, or use a state or federal program to put some habitat back on the landscape, while diversifying your row crop situations, looking for keeping your consistent tenant, and looking for long-term leases, and just improving the property.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into the land management side, and there's a lot of work to it. I know that you guys spend a lot of time in the summertime going back out to the properties, and Pifer's manages roughly 250,000 acres in the upper Midwest. And to get all of those properties droned and make those crop reports at the end of the year for the landowners, that's a huge undertaking. And it's a lot of really, really hard work. And I take my hat off to you guys. Tell us, Neil, as we're finishing up the end of the third segment of the Legacy of Agriculture, you can always call us at the office at 605-836-2277 for land management. Yes. But what's your cell phone number, Neil?
It's 605-351-4931.
And what's your email address?
It'd be nbroughton@pifers.com.
Okay.
And call me anytime you want. I'm open 24 hours a day, kind of thing. Probably don't tell my wife that, but I'll try to get back to you as soon as I possibly can if you call. Yeah.
That sounds great. Folks, we'll be right back with our fourth segment.
Hey, this is Jasmine at Pifer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pifer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifer's. Nobody does it better.
Folks, I'm Chris Bair, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us in our fourth and final segment. Neil Broughton, the newest land manager team member for the Pifer Sioux Falls team, has joined me here today. Neil is already up to his neck in work and wearing the wheels off on his pickup.
Yeah, we're rolling hard right now. Yeah, it's
I know you spent 3 days, almost 4 days last week with all of the land managers across the upper Midwest.
Yep.
Up in Moorhead at our corporate office, going through some training and talking about 2025. In our last segment, we talked a little bit about expectations from landowners and what they expect, but tell me a little bit about the process. And I use the illustration that I'm sitting across the table from you, and I've got land that I want to rent out, and you talked about the different, what I would call the palettes, what's palatable and what the expectations are for different types of landowners. But tell me a little bit about the process from the time you get the telephone call until you get to the end of the year and you've managed that property for a whole year. So tell me a little bit about that process.
Well, first, I'm a face-to-face guy. As soon as I get that phone call or knowledge that you would like to have a Pifer's take over the ag side or do ag leases with you, I like to meet face-to-face, but if that's not an option, maybe you're a snowbird, you're down in Arizona or someplace warm, unlike today, we can do over the phone or through email. And I just sit down and get a direction, I guess, learn first about you and the family or the trust that owns the property, and then we'll dive into what direction you want that property to go. If you want to stay on the ag side, I really like to keep the current tenant if it is a good tenant. I'm not here to force or go in there and try to bring in some other tenant to take over the ag lease. I mean, if we can keep the same tenant on the property that knows that property history, the soils, and what's going to be produced off that property, that's what I'd really like to keep. So then after that, we just break down into the leasing side of things. We'll go into the ag side. We can go off into the hunting leases, the CRP leases. We can just do all different array side of things, even utility. If we want to put a wind tower on there or solar panels, there's just so many different directions. That's why I need to meet with the landowner and talk it through, see what you as a landowner really wants to off your property.
Oftentimes with landowners, it's not about how much money I can rent my land for as much as it is about finding the right tenant or the right renter that will do what I want as the landowner. So I might take 10% less on land rent, knowing that I've got a renter or tenant that's coming in that will use the right kinds of fertilizer, that will maintain the fence lines the way that I want it, that will farm the way I would want it farmed. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. It's a partnership with that tenant and the landowner, and then Pifer's is just there to pretty much be the marriage counselor to get those two people together to maintain that property. That's what the goal kind of thing is, to find that right tenant for that property. I've had landowners that say, I'm not really into drain tile. I kind of want to stick with just the wetlands, and so we can work with that. We can work around that stuff, or we want to do less residue, baling of corn stalks and all that kind of stuff. We just want to leave the residue out there and just have them take the grain off of there, and we can work with that.
Because a lot of times they want to hold all the moisture that comes in the wintertime, but by leaving the corn stalks or whatever's out in the field, because they want to hold the moisture as long as they can, rather than getting rid of the moisture. I've also noticed on the land management side that not only is it the cropland that you are managing, but oftentimes, especially as you move further west or you go West River here in South Dakota, or you go down into Nebraska, is on say a section, you got 640 acres, but only 400 acres of it's tillable, and the balance of it is woodlands or needs to be managed from the hunting side. And so not only are you managing the cropland, but you guys will also manage the aspects of what's not cropped, or maybe there's a big farmyard with shops on it
Yes.
and a tree row, and you've actually got maybe a couple of different tenants on the same owner's land that you've got to manage.
Right. Yeah.
That gets pretty complicated.
It does. That's where you have to be organized, and that's
Okay.
what we stress: the organization and cleanliness, and just respecting what our client has.
It's a lot of work.
It is, but it's a goal and a desire for every land manager to have the best product they possibly can at the end. It's nothing like seeing a finished product and a happy customer, a happy client, and a happy tenant.
What would you say to our listeners that are listening out there that are 5 years away from retirement, or 3 years or 10 years away from retirement, and are thinking of making that transition from the farm into town? What advice would you give them?
I guess it's never too early to set up your future plans. I mean, we don't know if we're going to be here the next day. So have something set up with your family for a land management company to take over your property, or even just have that discussion with your family members. Hey, if this happens to me, I'd like to have this company take over. I want this done on the property, or managed this certain way. Just never too early to start that conversation.
Well, and so many families, so many landowners, mom and dad again, or grandpa, want to preserve that land for the family for future uses. So if we go back to the section scenario where there's 640 acres and 400 of it's tillable, maybe that other 200 acres or 240 acres, they have grandkids that want to hunt on that.
Yes.
And so they could preserve and rent out the farm ground, but keep the hunting land or the wooded areas or the sloughs for
Yes.
bird hunting for family members. So there's always that option as well,
Yeah.
too.
I was actually just talking to a customer yesterday that he had no idea about the hunting rights, and that just opened up his whole world. And he thought, well, I'm a big ice fisherman, and there's sloughs on my property that I know that have fish in them, so I can go out there and actually fish on my own property. I guess it's just something new that people that are not with the farming community, or not in that realm, that just don't know about that. And it's another way that we can get more money or profit off that property too, through the ag leases and hunting leases.
Well, unfortunately, Neil, we're running out of time, but fortunately,
Yeah.
the good thing is you're going to be with us for a long time.
Exactly.
So we're going to be able to do more radio shows along the way. But most importantly, those of you that have got land that you're thinking about renting in the future, how do our listeners get a hold of you?
Neil Broughton at Pifer's. My cell phone number is 605-351-4931. And my email is nbroughton, NBROUGHTON @pifers.com.
And Broughton's are all spelled differently too, I've noticed.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And we're the outlaws. We are BROs. Yeah, yeah.
you're the crazy part of the family. Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
yeah.
Or you can simply call our office here in Sioux Falls at 605-836-2277, or go to our website at pifers.com.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to get a hold of Neil if you're thinking about doing land management, or even just talking about land management in the future. You definitely want to get a hold of Neil.
Yeah. Talk to me about it. I mean, I love to talk habitat and land management. I definitely love it. So.
And if you've missed any of our previous shows, you can go on to Apple, Spotify, and now YouTube. And we appreciate everybody for joining us on the Legacy of Agriculture, and we'll be back next week.
In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna been on here now, who bid $500,000 bid.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bair, sponsored by Pifer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Call Pifer's at 605-836-2277.